this episode, we're going to build a study method that works even when you cannot stare at a screen, because the reality for most people is that consistent practice time shows up in small pockets during commutes, walks, chores, or breaks. Audio-only study can feel risky at first, since Linux topics often seem visual, but it becomes powerful once you understand what the exam really rewards, which is recognition, reasoning, and the ability to make a good decision from a short prompt. The goal here is not to replace reading forever, but to create a repeatable system that turns listening time into exam-ready memory. We are going to focus on recall loops, pause and answer drills, and the mindset that keeps you steady under time pressure, because these three pieces reinforce each other like legs of a stool. If you do them consistently, you stop relying on last-minute cramming and start building the kind of calm confidence that shows up when the clock is running. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. The first idea is a recall loop, which is simply a cycle where you hear a concept, try to retrieve it from memory without help, check what you missed, and then revisit it later so the memory strengthens over time. The key is that you are not listening passively like background music, because passive exposure creates familiarity without control, and the exam does not give points for familiarity. A recall loop forces your brain to do the hard part, which is pulling the idea out of storage when you need it, even if you feel unsure. That feeling of slight struggle is not a problem. It is the signal that learning is happening, because retrieval is what makes the pathway stronger. When you repeat a recall loop over days, the same topic starts taking less effort, and that reduced effort is what you want on exam day. You are training yourself to recognize the question's intent quickly and to access the right mental model without panic. A common mistake with audio study is trying to cover too much in one go, as if more minutes automatically means more progress, but the brain does better with smaller cycles that repeat. Think of recall loops as short workouts rather than a single marathon session, because a short workout repeated often builds strength more reliably than one huge effort you can only do occasionally. In practice, that means you want to hear a small segment, stop it, and see if you can explain it back in your own words, even if your explanation feels rough. Then you listen again and notice exactly what you left out, because those missing pieces are your actual study targets. Over time, your personal weak points become obvious, and you stop wasting time reviewing what you already know. Audio-only study becomes efficient when it is driven by what you fail to recall, not by what you enjoy hearing. That shift can feel uncomfortable, but it is what turns time into score. Pause and answer drills are the tool that makes recall loops practical, because they create a predictable moment where your brain must respond instead of drift. The drill is simple. You hear a prompt, you pause, and you answer out loud or silently with a complete thought, not a single keyword. Full answers matter because the exam is not testing whether you can recognize a term. It is testing whether you can choose between similar options based on what the term implies. If you only practice with one-word responses, you can trick yourself into thinking you understand something when you actually do not. A complete thought forces you to include relationships, like cause and effect, or how one subsystem influences another. It also exposes fuzzy spots fast, because when you cannot finish the explanation, you learn exactly where the gap begins. That is valuable because it gives your next study session a purpose instead of a vague feeling of needing to study more. When you design pause and answer prompts for yourself, you want them to sound like exam questions, not like textbook definitions. A definition prompt might ask what a thing is, but an exam prompt often asks what a symptom means, what a change will affect, or what you should do first given a constraint. So instead of practicing only what a component is called, practice what it does, what would happen if it failed, and what evidence would point to it. This helps because many exam questions give you a short story, and the answer depends on identifying the category of problem rather than recalling one isolated fact. Your prompts can be short, but your answers should connect the dots, like explaining how a decision influences stability, security, or boot behavior. Over time, you will notice that your answers begin to follow a consistent logic, and that logic is what you will reuse on the exam. The goal is to make reasoning feel automatic, So your limited exam time goes to choosing, not to rebuilding your understanding from scratch. Another reason audio-only practice works is that it trains attention and comprehension, which are two skills that quietly decide exam outcomes. On test day, you must absorb a prompt quickly, identify the ask, and avoid being distracted by extra details, and that is basically an advanced form of listening. When you practice with audio, you are repeatedly learning to hold a problem in your mind while you search memory for the relevant model, and that is exactly what you do in the exam, just with text instead of sound. If you can do it while walking or doing a simple task, you can certainly do it while sitting in a quiet room with a clock. The trick is to keep your audio sessions active, which means you do not let the content wash over you while you multitask heavily. Light movement is fine for many people, but anything that steals language attention, like writing an email or reading a message thread, will reduce the learning value. You want your brain to practice the same focus pattern it will need during the exam. It also helps to plan for spacing and revisiting, because memory fades in a predictable way unless you refresh it at the right times. Spacing means you return to a topic after a delay, not immediately, because the slight forgetting makes retrieval harder, and that harder retrieval is what strengthens the memory. This is why listening to the same segment 5 times in a row is less valuable than listening once today, once tomorrow, and once a few days later. Audio makes spacing easier because you can keep a rotating set of segments and revisit them during routine moments in your week. The moment you notice a topic feels too easy, that is a cue to give it more space and spend more time on weaker areas. The moment you notice a topic feels impossible, that is a cue to narrow it down into smaller prompts so you can rebuild it without frustration. A strong recall system keeps you in the zone where you are challenged but not overwhelmed. As you do these drills, you will run into a psychological hurdle that surprises many beginners, which is the discomfort of being wrong out loud. When you pause an answer, you will sometimes say something that is incomplete or incorrect, and it can feel embarrassing even if nobody is listening. That discomfort is actually useful because it creates emotional tagging, which helps memory, but only if you respond to it in a healthy way. The healthy response is curiosity. What exactly did I miss? And what would have led me to the correct reasoning? The unhealthy response is avoidance, skipping the hard prompts, staying in familiar topics, or letting the audio play without pausing so you never have to confront the gap. If you can train yourself to treat mistakes as data, your study sessions become honest, and honest sessions create real improvement. Over time, the discomfort fades because you build trust that you can recover and adjust, and that trust is the foundation of a strong exam day mindset. Now let's connect this to pacing and decision-making, because audio practice can also train you to answer within a reasonable time instead of spiraling. When you pause, give yourself a short internal timer, even if you never measure it formally, and aim to produce a best-effort answer rather than a perfect lecture. The exam rewards good decisions under time pressure, not perfect explanations under unlimited time. If you cannot answer within that short window, practice making a partial answer that still includes the key idea and the constraint, because partial answers often reveal that you actually know more than you think. Then, after you check the correct explanation, you can refine your answer and try again later. This pattern teaches your brain that uncertainty does not equal failure, and that you can move forward without freezing. That matters because many test takers lose time not to hard questions, but to the emotional reaction of feeling unsure and trying to force certainty. Audio drills can rewire that habit into calm, controlled action. Exam day mindset is not motivational talk. It is a set of practical mental behaviors that protect your performance when stress tries to hijack your attention. A strong mindset starts with acceptance that you will see questions you do not love, and that you do not need to be perfect to pass. When you accept that, you stop treating every confusing question as a threat and start treating it as a normal part of the environment. Another mindset skill is staying present, meaning you do not mentally replay the last question you were unsure about while reading the next one. That replay steals time and comprehension, and it can create a chain reaction where one rough moment turns into several missed questions. You train presence during audio drills by letting an imperfect answer go and moving on, knowing you will revisit the topic later in a recall loop. That practice creates a stable emotional rhythm, and stability is more valuable than bursts of confidence followed by crashes. A practical way to build this mindset is to practice neutral self-talk, which is the internal voice that describes what is happening without drama. Instead of saying you are terrible at a topic, you say the topic is weak right now and you have a plan to strengthen it. Instead of saying you always panic under time, you say you are learning a pacing strategy and you can execute it one question at a time. This matters because the brain treats emotional language as a signal of threat, and threat narrows attention, which is the opposite of what you want during a reading-heavy exam. Audio practice can include a short reset habit where you breathe, restate the ask, and answer, because breathing is the easiest way to tell your body that it is safe. You are not trying to become emotionless. You are trying to prevent emotion from driving decisions. When your mind is calm, you read more accurately, eliminate distractors faster, and trust your best answer instead of second-guessing endlessly. Another important part of exam day mindset is knowing what to do when you hit a question that feels like a trap. A trap question is usually one where multiple answers seem plausible, where the wording is tight, or where you feel yourself wanting to reread the prompt again and again. Your response should be procedural. Identify the constraint word, identify the domain category, eliminate answers that do not match the category, and choose the option that makes the least risky change while meeting the goal. Audio drills help because you can practice hearing a prompt and immediately asking, what is the ask, what is the constraint, and what is the safest action? When you do that repeatedly, you stop relying on luck and start relying on a method. If you still feel stuck, the correct move is to make your best choice, mark it mentally, and move on, rather than donating more time than you can afford. A mindset is strong when it includes a plan for uncertainty, not when it pretends uncertainty will not happen. It is also useful to think about how audio-only study fits into a broader routine, because consistency is what makes recall loops work. Many people study in intense bursts and then stop for a week, and the stop is what breaks memory, not the lack of talent. Audio allows you to keep the chain unbroken because it can fit into small windows, and small windows add up when they happen daily. The goal is not to turn every minute into studying, because rest matters, but to create reliable touchpoints that keep concepts warm in your mind. When concepts stay warm, your brain does not spend the first 10 minutes of a session just remembering what you were doing last time. You also reduce the temptation to cram, because you can feel progress week by week through faster recall and cleaner explanations. That sense of steady progress supports motivation naturally, without needing hype, because you can hear yourself getting sharper. As your practice improves, you will notice a shift from memorizing isolated facts to building mental models that can answer many questions at once. A mental model is a structured understanding of how parts relate, like what happens before what depends on what, and what symptoms appear when a dependency fails. Audio prompts that ask for relationships, not just definitions, are what build those models. When you can explain a model in your own words, you can also predict outcomes. And prediction is a big part of exam success because it lets you eliminate answers that would cause the wrong outcome. This is also where beginners often surprise themselves, because they realize they can reason through a question even if they cannot remember a specific term perfectly. The exam is designed to reward that kind of thinking, because in real environments you often solve problems by reasoning from evidence and constraints. Audio-only study, when done actively, is a model-building machine because it forces you to speak the relationships aloud and make them coherent. By now, you should have a clear picture of how to turn listening time into real preparation. Recall loops create repeated retrieval over time, pause and answer drills force active reasoning, and an exam day mindset keeps you calm and decisive when uncertainty appears. The strength of this method is that it matches how the exam actually feels, where you read a short prompt, retrieve a model, and choose the best option under time pressure. You do not need perfect conditions to get value from audio practice, but you do need honest pauses where you attempt an answer and notice what is missing. When you make mistakes, the method does not collapse. It gets more precise, because your errors become the map of what to revisit next. If you carry this approach forward, your study time will stop feeling like passive exposure and start feeling like measurable skill building. Most importantly, when exam day arrives, your brain will recognize the rhythm of the task, and that familiarity will help you stay steady, read carefully, and keep moving with confidence.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.